the students for generations. I understand why they're not going along with me and they're not agreeing with me. What I don't understand is how my colleagues are these other supposedly smart students. They're not questioning jack shit either. These are the intelligentsia. These are the doctors, the engineers, the so-called smart people. They're not questioning shit. They're doing exactly as the master says, and they hate any other person that might speak up. And I know why the massa doesn't like, me questioning their authority. I'm basically saying that they've lived their entire life in vain. They have been oppressing and manipulating people, and then everybody that they supposedly educated are going to be manipulated for the rest of their lives. They're not actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not making them better, stronger people so they can go out there and get the good jobs and take the world by its tail and do something. They'll just sit there and act like they're just like a glass to be filled, right? Just, I'm the smart person, you're the dumb person, and I'm going to tell you all that I know, and then you'll be smart as me because now you know all my knowledge. Well, knowledge doesn't work like that. You got to take knowledge, you got to learn it, then you got to use it. And so if I'm just being a passive person who just soaks it up, I'm not learning anything. I'm going to, the night before, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to cram all the multiple choice answers that I can in my brain, and then I'm going to forget about it as soon as the test is over, as soon as the class is over. I ain't going to remember any of it. And that's not how school's supposed to be. Breckenridge is from James Clotter here. And the good Breckenridge, William Breckenridge, they're all pretty much racist as shit, but he's like the least racist one. But William Breckenridge was talking about how the classroom should be a field of battle, where thought contests with thought. Out of this comes only good. The professor must teach his pupil to think free from censorship, even though he may teach heresy, rebellion, and schism. So even though he might say, well, there was a Nat Turner rebellion, right? Even the American Revolution was a rebellion, a successful rebellion. But they're saying that it should be a battlefield. Thought contests with thought. We should debate. And the way a teacher should be, you don't want to dictate to them and tell them what to think. You're not a sage on the stage. You don't want to be worshipped like some sort of God figure that can do no wrong. You're a guide by the side. And a guide by the side, what they do is they get them to think on their own. And basically, you're like an administrator. You're a referee. So you get a step back. Let the students decide for themselves how they organize the class, what they want to learn. Let them have power in the decision making, and then let them go. If they're talking about the fact, like whenever you're in a class and you talking to your neighbor and the professor just look at you like a total asshole, that's exactly hierarchy destroying a relationship. I was forming a relationship. We could have been good friends. Now I got this fucking dictator sitting there staring at me like a fucking dickhead. Well, I was whispering, right? What the fuck? I ain't allowed to fucking whisper. So that's directly a hierarchy destroying a relationship. But it's also it's dialogue. So that's you're destroying democracy and their autonomy and all the rest of the things I was talking about. But what was I talking about? How the classroom should be a battlefield of ideas, thought contest against thought, and you're more of a referee. You're not a dictator. You're not an autocratic monarch having to be worshipped all the time as if you can do no wrong. In fact, that goes against Socrates. Socrates says the key to wisdom is to admit your ignorance. So if you're acting like some Mr. Know-it-all, like you got all the facts and you know every goddamn thing on the fucking planet, you don't know shit, okay? The people who are wise, they admit their ignorance. If they're wise, they admit that there's shit that they don't know. And by admitting that there's shit you don't know, you can begin to start to study that shit you don't know, so then you do know this shit, right? If you don't ever admit that you don't know something, then you're never going to actually gain any knowledge in that field. So the key to wisdom is to admit your ignorance. And if you don't admit your ignorance, then, you're basically fucked. No, you're just an asshole. So, like I said, it should be more of an administrator. It should be like a referee. So that way, I feel like the only thing that I need to do is make sure my students aren't harming each other, make sure they're not insulting each other and being jerks to each other, to teach them to respect themselves and to respect each other and each other's opinions. So if there was a debate or if there was a dialogue or some discussion, my point is to make sure they're not getting into the fights, to make sure that they're not being, they're not being total assholes and like calling each other names and shit. My point is to just make sure that they're treating each other correctly and that they're on track, with if I'm in public schools, and make sure they're on track with learning the standards And if I was to get to a Sudbury model school that actually was democratic, where you have town hall meetings where the parents, the students, and the school administration all get together to conduct, sessions. If you could actually find a school like that, then that's the ideal school that you could have, because then you're totally sharing in power. But in those type of schools, it would just be more of an administrator, more of a referee. Hey, I want to do this research project. Can you help me out? Yes, I can. I'd like to do this biology project. I want to raise all these different types of tomatoes, and I want to be like, Mendel, and try to figure out which variety I can, produces the biggest tomato. Can you help me design this scientific experiment? Yes, I can. So that's, I'm more of a referee. I'm more of an administrator to help them reach their own goals. That's my idea of a true educator. If I'm going in traditional schools, I'm going to have to teach standards, and then, it's all going to fall on me, and I'll have all this sort of, all my colleagues are going to hate me. But in my classroom, I'll run my classroom how I want to run them, and I believe by giving them freedom and by making it entertaining and making it fun, my students will want to learn. They'll come in energized, and they'll want to learn. And, I might have to manage a few, but I'm going to lead the most. And actually, that's how you're supposed to do with adults. If education is so damned important, how come we don't have adults just getting together and talking about ideas, just sitting in classrooms listening to some, asshole lecture at them like they're fucking stupid? If education is so damn good, how come that doesn't happen? It doesn't happen because education is bullshit and everybody fucking knows it. And so, but unfortunately, it serves a purpose. It's got order. It allows the bosses and the ruling classes and the military, it teaches them to be obedient. It teaches students to, be obedient workers, to be obedient automatons. And it's all by design. This part of the video is I was going to talk about the three tiers, okay? So we have a three-tiered Prussian industrial education. It comes from the industrial age. You had all these factories, and the machines couldn't run themselves, so you needed to have educated people that could run the machines. And the Prussians, they wanted good warriors. They wanted good soldiers. When Napoleon came and conquered Germany in 1806, Napoleon's troops, they were just going into the middle of battlefields on suicide missions, and they were just doing anything that Napoleon had commanded them to do, willy-nilly, without even giving a shit, without even questioning. The commander says, go do it, let's go do it, because they felt like they were doing something for France. They were doing something for the French Revolution. The French Revolution was for the people. But, then it got too bloody and it got all chaotic and stuff. So Napoleon came in and he was like, I'm going to be the dictator for the proletariat. I'm going to go around with my civil code and I'm going to spread France's message everywhere. So the French soldiers really thought that they were fighting for something that they truly believed in. But when it comes to the Germans, who were just fighting for the princes and the kings and, all these assholes, whenever it comes to the field of battle, they was running away. They were like, fuck this, I'm not going to die for this shit. And they were running away. Well, the Prussians said, well, we got to fix this. We got to make sure that the Germans love their country and love who they are. We got to instill nationalism in them, and we got to make them obedient. That's the biggest thing. Make them obedient for the corporations, for the industrial masters, for the land peasants that they're on, for some type of de facto serfdom, some type of, sort of slavery. They're living on Massa's land, but they could raise, 4 acres for Massa and raise 1 acre for themselves, and that's, that was like supposed to be good or something. So this author comes from John Taylor Gatto. And John Taylor Gatto, he points out how the American education system it came from Prussia. So Horace Mann, who's the father of American Common Schools, the movement, the Common Schools movement, and the Common Schools is the public education. So he's the father of American public schools. Horace Mann, he goes to Prussia in 1843, and he comes back in 1852, and he gets Massachusetts to adopt his style of education, and then it just starts spreading like wildfire all throughout the United States. Prussia, what they wanted to do, okay, so they wanted to have a nice, rigid, ordered society, just benefiting mostly the ruling classes. So if you're the king and you're the dictator, how do you want all the masses to be organized? What is the best way to organize all the people? Well, the way the Prussians figured out, well, you need lots of workers, right? Most of the people are just going to be stupid workers, just do the labor and just, make some food and be farmers and make food for everybody else. and be craftsmen and, just be working class folks, right? But you're also going to need some doctors, you're going to need some lawyers, you're going to need some of the upper echelon people. And then the top tier, you're actually going to need people who knows what the fuck is going on. You need to tell people the actual truth, okay? So there's 3 tiers. The first tier, and this one was for about 0.5% of the population. Not 1%, just 0.5%. And they'll go to the academy school, which is Akademieschule, right? Some German words. But they go to the academy. And then for 5 to 7.5% of the population, they'll go to real school, the real schooling. And the rest are doomed to be servants for the top 1/2 and the 5 to 7% until they die. And they're just going to go to the people's school education, which is Volksschoolen. Okay, so what's the point for the top 1/2% of the population? Well, for the top 1/2% of the population who's going to go to the academy school, they actually need to know what the fuck is going on, right? They're going to be the ones that rule over everything, but they also got to question some of the bigger questions of the day, right? Physics and science and, not just military strategy, but that's a part of it too, plus how to best oppress the people. So the top 1/2% of the ruling class, they're going to need to know what is going on. So the rich kids and the kings and queens, the sons and daughters of the kings and queens, they need to know what's actually going on. And so we're, as future policymakers, the top 1/2%, they learn how to think strategically, contextually in wholes. They would learn complex processes, science, definitely useful knowledge. They'd study history. They wrote copiously, argued often. They would read deeply, and they mastered the task of command. So they knew how to give orders, how to dictate. They argued often, so that way they would learn better and know what's going on. They would read deeply, wrote copiously, studied history. Right? So all these things that they did, so that way they could gain the knowledge and be useful rulers. Sons and daughters of the ruling class either need to take the king's position, or they got to find something else that is, that's useful to society. But the other 2 bottom tiers, the next 5 to 7%, these are your middle class type folks, right? Your engineers, your doctors, your lawyers, your police officers. They will only get to rise as long as they're obedient, because you don't want the middle class. I mean, a lot of people, the bourgeoisie, they say you need a bourgeoisie for democracy. And that's how they said democracy in America was able to thrive, because the middle class started to make some money during the Industrial Revolution. And then when you had Woodrow Wilson with the draft and you had all these other bad policies, the middle class was like, whoa, what the fuck? I like my, little comfortable life here. And I have stuff to lose, and now you're trying to take the stuff that I had to lose. I'm not just a dumb peasant. So the middle class, because they actually had something to take away, they knew who they are, they had dignity, they had self-value and self-worth, they would fight against the dictators, and then eventually, get some sort of changes. You'd get FDR and give a new deal where we have Social Security and have, Medicare and, some of the benefits that help public works projects, that would help the economy and to help out the poor folks. So the next 5 to 7% of the Prussian population attended real schooling, and that was intended mostly as a manufacturing for the professional proletariat of engineers, architects, doctors, lawyers, career civil servants, and other such assistants as policy thinkers at the time would require. And they were taught how to manage materials, men, and situations, to be problem solvers. The group would also staff the various policing functions of the state, bringing order to the domain. So they learned how to manage people. They were going to be the masters of industry, right? Men, situations. They would bring order. They were the police officers. So these people are just educated slightly enough. George Carlin talks about how they want to educate us, right? Politicians always talk about education, but it's bullshit. Because really what they want is they want an obedient population that will run the machines and do all their shitty, stupid fucking paperwork, but they don't want you to rebel and to say, hey, we want better benefits and we want higher wages and we're going to strike, we're going to unionize together unless we get what we want. They don't want that. So they want us just smart enough to do the shit, but they don't want us that smart to where we actually start to say, hey, wait a second, I'm a person too, we're all people, there's way more slaves than there's a massa. Right? They don't want that to happen. So they don't want to educate the majority of the population, just 5%. 5%, give them some money, make them a happy house Negro, the doctors, the lawyers. Once they get a piece of the pie, they get a little, they get a little bit of the icing on the cake, then, they'll be fat and happy and they won't want to rebel. But the other, 95, 94, 92 to 94%, the Volksschoolen, the general population, They just learn obedience, cooperation, the correct attitudes, along with rudiments of literacy and official state myths of history. So they're to understand that Germany is the greatest country in the world. Nobody's going to, if you go to fight, if France comes in here again, we're going to fight for the fatherland. Germany is the fatherland, and it's important, and it's the most important thing in the world. Our history is just about how Germany is smart and progress, and it's great. But all these other stupid barbaric countries are a bunch of assholes, and they want to take away what us Germans have been creating the whole time. That's the point of educating 92 to 94%, the Volksschooling. And that's the last group, right? So they'll learn a little bit of literacy, so they're not just totally making dumb behaviors, and so they can, run the machines and be cannon fodder for the war machine. Now there's 6 results that John Taylor Gatto had pointed out. He says the reason why they had this 3-tiered system was why did you have so many of the Volksschooling, right? 92 to 94%. That's the general, that's the masses, right? That's the dictator, and then that's the masses. And so why do we have it like this? Why is it structured like that? Not only is it obedient soldiers to the army, obedient workers for mines, factories, and the farms, well-subordinated civil servants trained in their functions, the judges, the lawyers, the politicians, right? You want them to be able to speak about the issues, but you don't want them to actually overthrow. The king has all the power. The ruling classes get to keep everything. The CEOs and King Cole, which is Mitch McConnell, right? They get to keep all the shit that they want to keep, and fuck the general population and fuck everybody else. They're just a bunch of peasants, and actually you don't want them to have, any type of bare sustenance, or to have minimum wage, or to have health care, because you want them desperate. And the more desperate they are, the more likely they'll take any type of job, and you could fire them, and then there's a whole nother 10 people ready to take that job. So the more desperate poor people are, the better it is for the working classes. So well-subordinated civil servants, well-subordinated clerks for the industry, citizens who thought alike on most issues, so national uniformity in thought, word, and deed. There is actually, Bill O'Reilly talks about the culture wars. And the culture wars is that America, and what America means and what America is a very specifically defined individual. It's a Christian, it's a white person, and that's, that's pretty much it. Educated, white, Christian, Republican. So they care about themselves, and they don't care about anybody else. They love God, and it's all about Jesus. And it's not how, it's not about like loving the poor and loving the sick and stuff like that, but it's more about obeying your parents and give to Caesar's what is his, So to make sure that, you give to the government, the ruling classes, what they want, but you don't actually, fight for yourself. There was a good-ass quote by Immortal Technique. I got a friend who's actually making really a lot of good music with caring about the soldiers who's coming over here for post-traumatic stress disorder. But I'm taking his music to mean something completely different. So he was talking about ISIS and how he went over there and fought for Iraq, and now ISIS is coming back, and he's like, damn, those kids that I helped build schools for are getting shot in the back, and what the hell? But what makes me wonder is, like, we have the courage to fight for the throne. We got the courage to fight for the White House and the dictators and the ruling classes. But do we have the courage to fight for our own? Yeah, it's good that he cares about the poor people in Iraq, but what about the poor people in this country? Who's here to fight here? You can fight for the throne, but do you fight for your own? And so there's poor people here that need, schools and good hospitals, and we got homeless people on the street, and we got poor people. That is, capitalism is broken, and it's been broken for a long-ass time, since the very beginning. But it's not broken for the ruling classes, who need to have a big old blob of people who's desperate so they can afford them for cheap labor. Slave wages, you are cheap labor. That's, that's what you're doing. And hopefully the idea is that you move on beyond that. But I know that there's 50, 60-year-old people that's working at McDonald's. They're not moving on. They're not getting better. Americans are working harder. They're getting twice as many jobs. The women are going out to work, not because they want to for opportunity, but because they got to in order to have 2 incomes coming into the house. And Americans are also borrowing more money than we're making. So that's how we're getting by. We keep on putting ourselves in debt. We're working ourselves to death, and we're making our women go out and get some shitty jobs just like we do. And that's bullshit. That's bullshit. We need more stimuluses. We need less wars. We need to care more about ourselves. So, Health, happiness, civics, making money, democracy, justice, peace, solidarity, and love all take a backseat to the widespread national collective brainwashing in the name of order and control. And I think it's bullshit. But that's the beginning of my, or that's the main crux of the three-tiered system. I go in and explain the history of Prussia, and then how, if we're adopting a Prussian system, what are we adopting? What is Prussia? Most people don't even know what Prussia is. It don't even exist anymore. And then the industrial model, because, there's regimented classes, the lunch hour, bell schedule. You think for math about an hour. You think on social studies for an hour. You think on science for an hour, and that's education, right? When you have a highly regimented thing, that's more military. That's more the Marines. That's more your corporations and your factories, right? There's the bell, do as you say. Now just do this, do that. I'm the fucking king, and you do as the fuck as I say. And that's the industrial model. So, I basically go on and on. That's sort of a short synopsis, but that's the absolute crux. You have the ruling classes who's actually educating their own. You have the middle class, about 5%. That's the civil engineers and the doctors and the lawyers and the architects who's still obedient to the ruling classes. And then you got the Volksschoolen, the fucking peasant commoners going into the school. You're giving your kids to the school system, and they're oppressing the shit out of them so they can be manipulated for the rest of your lives. When I was younger, I'm getting my ass kicked at the house, and then they're telling me what to do at the school. And the people at the school loved that I was getting my ass kicked at the house, so that way they could, manipulate me. The oppressors could work in tandem with each other. If I didn't do as I was supposed to do, I get my ass kicked there. If I didn't do myself there, get more orders there. So they worked in tandem with each other, right? And it's all fucking bullshit, because the oppressor doesn't love you. If they have to take away your freedom and to make you into an object to be controlled, they're taking away your humanity. That's what your freedom is. It is your humanity. And if they got to take away your humanity, they don't really love you. If they got to take away your humanity and your soul. And so fuck the oppressors. Time for the oppressed people to get free. So working classes of the world, let's unite.